Behind-the-scenes look at the papal election process, its secrets and its candidates in every man. The main evening news and campaign report first on BBC One with Peter Sissons.
One of John Major's closest supporters warns senior party figures against positioning themselves for a leadership contest. Lord Archer doesn't name names, but says that if they don't get behind the Prime Minister, the party won't forget. Israel's Prime Minister will not be indicted on corruption charges for lack of evidence. And water and fire, the nightmare that has driven 50,000 people from an American city. Good evening. Lord Archer, a former deputy chairman of the Conservative Party, today conceded that one or two figures in the party were positioning themselves for a leadership contest after the election. But he said they were wasting their time because the election was not going to be lost. And Lord Archer, who's been close to the Prime Minister during the campaign, warned them if they didn't get behind the Prime Minister, the party would remember their actions very clearly. Our political editor, Robin Oakley, reports.
Leading Tories have been alarmed to find the party's campaign, 11 days from the election, being diverted by tensions over Europe and by perceived manoeuvrings by senior figures in the expectation of a leadership contest immediately after it. Lord Archer, the Prime Minister's chief cheerleader on his countrywide campaign, says the party won't forgive those seen to be positioning themselves rather than working all out for Mr. Major.
I hear what is being said and I see one or two figures doing that. And I'm bound to say to them, their duty is quite simply to get behind the Prime Minister in this next 2 weeks. And if they don't, the party will remember very clearly.
Are people in the Conservative Party, do you think, entitled at this stage to start thinking about a future leadership contest?
This election is not going to be lost, and the Prime Minister will continue, and those people who are wasting their time working out their own positions will find they have no position at all.
Sunday newspaper headlines talked of a bitter Tory succession battle and the race for Major's job. And the latest disagreement over Europe was evident when Kenneth Clarke, the pro-European Chancellor, contradicted Eurosceptic Home Secretary Michael Howard's view that the very survival of Britain as a nation-state was at stake at the forthcoming Amsterdam Euro Summit. Other ministers denied any split.
Well, if you have a party made up of large numbers of people, of course they won't all say precisely the same soundbite. We're not, as we've underlined, a Stalinist party. We don't simply read out the form of words issued by a Stalinist centre.
The opposition was swift to exploit the Tory disarray.
This is the weekend when the Conservative Party became two Conservative parties, with even cabinet ministers fighting against each other in open warfare. And this is the weekend also when the Conservative leadership campaign took over from the general election campaign. And it's all because of the weakness of the leadership under John Major.
I think what you're seeing is the beginnings of a civil war in the Conservative Party. I thought it would happen after the election, but it is clearly now begun. It is absolutely clear to me that the Conservatives now have given up on this election and are fighting the election after the election. And the election after the election is the election for the leadership of the Conservative Party. As
Labour sought too to press on with their own agenda, they put the focus on health, saying that hospital waiting lists were up to a record 1.1 million. They spelled out a 5-point action plan to reduce waiting lists and waiting times. Slashing bureaucracy, they said, could be done without costing jobs.
I do want fewer people in the NHS pushing bits of paper around. I want more people in the NHS on wards treating patients. That is a fundamental objective, yes, but I think we can achieve that without wading in and sacking people involuntarily.
Mr. Major's strategy of highlighting Europe in the hope of persuading electors Labour wouldn't fight hard enough for Britain's interests always carried the risk of emphasising Tory divisions, and it's getting dangerously close to the election for such arguments to be on view. Labour and the Liberal Democrats, meanwhile, are able to claim brownie points for concentrating on their policy message. Robin Oakley, BBC News, Westminster.
The Conservatives have used the opening of the Scottish Trades Union Congress in Glasgow to try to focus attention once more on Labour's links with the unions. The Trade Secretary Ian Lang said the unions were presenting a litany of left-wing demands that would ruin Britain. But Labour said the conference would have no effect on party policy. Our industry correspondent John Fryer reports.
There's a long left-wing tradition in the Scottish trade union movement, reflected in resolutions on the conference agenda. Labour knew their political opponents would seize on this to attack their links with the unions. There was a standing ovation for Mick McGahey, veteran of the miners' strike in the mid-80s. Leaders of the big national unions were here in Glasgow, but this conference doesn't set Labour Party policy, and the TUC General Secretary told his Scottish colleagues he didn't want them to.
There aren't going to be rewards for our shared history, no gifts for Auld Lang Syne. And you know, that's right. A new Labour government must govern in the interests of the whole country, not act on behalf of just one, however powerful, interest group and one lobby.
But earlier today, the President of the Board of Trade said that within the Labour Party, the unions are still a powerful force.
The Labour Party and the trade union movement are joined at the hip and at the wallet. The Labour Party's wallet is bulging with trade union money, and the trade union wallet is bulging with Labour IOUs.
The Liberal Democrats said it was a significant reappearance of the old left.
The re-emergence of the old and ugly head of old Labour. I'm not saying they'll dominate, Mr. Eyre, but they're there, and we know them, and we see them in the Scottish TUC conference this weekend. The agenda from hell, the agenda from Mr. Blair's worst nightmare.
Later, Labour said that the Conservatives were at odds with each other. Despite Ian Lang's criticism, the Scottish Secretary Michael Forsyth, in a message to the STUC, said they'd made an essential contribution.
The Tories have made complete fools of themselves again. On the one hand, Forsyth is saying what a valuable contribution the STUC makes to Scottish life. On the other hand, Lang is trying to portray the trade unions as some sort of two-headed monster that's going to destroy society as we know it.
But I don't see why the STUC shouldn't discuss what it believes in. If it's having its annual congress, it's a trade union movement. It's surely entitled to bring forward views for discussion, for motions for debate. Just because it's inconvenient to London-based politicians who try to cast these views into the outer darkness.
This conference has again given the Tories the chance to play the union card, but Labour stresses that its policy towards the unions remains unchanged. Fairness but no favours. John Fryer, BBC News, Glasgow.
The Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu won't face criminal charges. Joining me now is the BBC's political editor, Robin Oakley. Robin, was Lord Archer doing a bit of freelancing with this warning, or was he speaking on higher authority?
Well, Lord Archer is closely involved with the practicalities of the Prime Minister's campaign. He's one of his most loyal allies. I'd be surprised if what he said didn't reflect the Prime Minister's feelings, at least in a general sense. And certainly it's true, there's a lot of anger at Tory Central Office about John Redwood. They feel his protestations of loyalty are wearing a bit thin, given the involvement of one of his leading adjutants in the channeling of funds to Tories who are prepared to take a line against the government line on the single currency. But a certain amount of all this positioning that's going on is inevitable. The Tories have been further behind in the polls for longer than any government in history. Everybody expects that if they are defeated, Mr. Major would not stay long as Prime Minister. Therefore, there is bound to be jostling for position among those in the Cabinet who might succeed him.
Just looking ahead briefly to next week, the last full week of the campaign, they'll expect all these sideshows to stop and presumably go into some real hardball for the final push.
It will get tougher and tougher as we go on. The Tories will try and unite the themes of Europe and the economy, pointing to their achievements on the economy and how if things go wrong in Europe that could be put at risk. A bit of positive policy from them on the education side, getting more money into schools, less to local authorities. Labour will carry on with practical policies, deliverable policies on health, education, things like that. But Mr. Blair will take some time out for a big attacking speech on Mr. Major, saying that his credentials for leading in Europe are not good enough with what he's done on fish and war. Liberal Democrats will go on with their policies on health and education, hoping they'll get more of the complement of attacks from the Labour Party.
Robin Oakley, thank you. And you can see a special interview with the Liberal Democrat leader Paddy Ashdown on Panorama at 8:30 on BBC One tomorrow. But that's all from the newsroom tonight. Good night.